I was born here in Corden, and my ancestors on my father's side go back to about 1815 that I can document. An elderly couple they were born in Virginia, but they relocated to North Carolina, apparently devoted their entire lives to helping enslaved people get out of slavery into free territory, so that by the time they reached Indiana Territory, and Harrison County in particular, they had 100 people, slaves with them. These were slaves who were freed right here in Corden, and my great-great-great-grandmother, whose name was Millie, was in that enclave. The fact that many people would come into a small community like this is just unbelievable, because typically when people who were enslaved were getting out of slavery, escaping, fleeing as it were, it was one person, maybe two at most, maybe three, but not 100 people. Can you imagine that? It's just hard for me to envision it. But to make that long, long journey because of their commitment to freedom is something very special. I had hoped that the welcome into this territory would have been warm, but I've learned since then that it wasn't so warm, and I have 2 letters that were written by townspeople, prominent townspeople. They sent them to the territorial governor complaining and saying, we've heard that these people are coming into our community, and what are we going to do about our daughters and our wives and our corn and our storehouses and such? So it indicated that they were not welcoming to them, but what could they do about it? This was free territory. The Mitchums followed through and gave them all their freedom. So they stayed here, and the majority died here, which says something as well. They must have been left alone to some degree, or they would not have stayed. They probably would have traveled even farther north. People of color have been in this community since about 1800, and yet it took almost 100 years to get a public school built to accommodate the needs of those families and those children. So in 1891, the school district let bids. This building was built for about $1,100, and it was an elementary and a secondary school. And the high school was discontinued in 1925 because there weren't enough students to keep it going. And by 1950, they informed the school district here that the whole school had to be closed because there weren't enough students. My own sister was one of the last students to attend this school. So I had the privilege of purchasing the school, and I renamed it for my Aunt Leora because she had graduated from high school here. And then she taught here longer than any other teacher. And she loved this school. She told me that she spent most of her life here and that she just loved it. She loved her profession. And the sad thing is, when it was closed, even though she had tenure, she was not retained by the school district, and yet she should have been having tenure. So when I purchased the building, I renamed it for her to give her that honor. In doing research on the school and all that surrounded that sort of piqued my interest in African American history, and I still have so much to learn. It's just amazing how much there is. In each county in this state, I think we could come up with volumes of information about that population. What I suggested to my colleagues is that we make the history of African Americans as cohesive as we possibly could, starting with the territorial period. What was it like? Who came into Indiana? Who were they and where were they? In southern Indiana, because southern Indiana has the oldest history in the state. Let's try to figure out whether or not it can be done here, and then if it can be, we can extend it throughout the entire state of Indiana. I would love to see the broad public embrace African American history as their history too, because it is. It's all of our history. So, all these stories, unless we pull them up, no one will ever know. And there is a curiosity, and I think children are very curious about it. We owe it to them to pass along this information. I think that we have set an example here. Hopefully it may take time, because this is the kind of work that doesn't happen overnight, but I think it will happen if we can just keep our excitement going. I try to get people excited about it because it is fascinating stuff.